Okay, we're live.
And it's not even 9 o'clock yet. And now it's 9 o'clock. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Township of Georgian Bay Planning Council for Tuesday, December 14th, 2021. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. In the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories they traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, and the sky, and all that live on, in, and above it. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this place and to continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take actions towards real truth and reconciliation. Miigwech. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest or any other forms of conflict? Seeing none, I understand we have a delegation this morning. Is our delegate, is that the right term? Here?
I think so. Yes. I'm just promoting him to panelist now.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent.
Please go ahead.
Okay, can I share my screen? I put together a bit of a presentation here. I'm not very good at this, so please bear with me.
I trust that one of our clerks will be able to get you to share your screen.
Yeah, at the bottom, Mr. Herring, you should see a big green button. There you go. Perfect.
Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Driveway to paradise.
Yes, that's the plan. So just a quick introduction. My name's John Herron, and my family, my wife Cindy, and I have two kids, Hunter and Emily. We currently live in the Fergus Aurora area, just north of Guelph, and we bought a couple of lots on Gloucester Passage, just at the top of Gloucester Pool by Big Shoot in 2019. So there's some basic information. In September 2030, the plan is to retire up there, renovate the cottage into a home. It's basically a home now. It's all season, but there's no road access or driveway. It's only boat access from Little Chute Landing. It's an older picture of us. So here's a brief explanation. I can't read it here with this. Okay. So the driveway we want to build goes between John O'Hara's property, which is a private property, which he already started the route for this proposed driveway. About 5 years ago, he had it surveyed, permitted, and stumped out. And so the driveway that we're looking to build goes between Mr. O'Hara's property across Crown land to our property. That section is approximately 356 meters long. There's no other private property that it crosses. There's an existing trail. I'm not sure how old it is. I would suspect probably the early 1900s that goes through that route as well. For the most part, there's no sensitive areas that I can identify. It's no swamp or low-lying areas. It's all basically rock and scrub brush with very few trees. I haven't identified any even, old growth trees or anything like that in the area. I believe it was all logged in the early 1900s. There's 9 potential stakeholders for the driveway and 11 if you include my second lot and Mr. Crook's second lot. There's a list of the stakeholders. I've emailed all this to Christine, if anybody wants to see a copy of this or the surveys or anything after this delegation as well. So in order for the stakeholders to access this driveway, Mr. O'Hara requires a significant buy-in to be able to cross his property. The cost of the buy-in and so far unknown costs of getting the permit and building the road has kept any of the stakeholders from giving a firm commitment. However, there are 5 of us that are seriously committed if it becomes affordable, which a lot depends on the permitting. So the first part of this was I applied to the MNRF through their extensive permitting process. And part of the process from the MNRF to get them to consider the permit is to have a form signed by the municipality stating that they're in agreement with my plan and don't see any issues. So then I went to the township, to the planning department, and the takeaway from that was that we're possibly going to need an Ansi impact assessment, that there's a potential for archaeological, I guess that means artifacts in the area. I had a look at some archaeological kind of maps, and it looks to me like that only really applies at the waterfront. But I need clarification on that, which apparently has to come from the district. I've requested information, but haven't heard anything back as of yet from the district. But the driveway isn't going to go down to the water anyways. There's kind of a flat area up above, which I think is about 75 to 100 meters, pardon me, from the water. And also a permission for the use of the township road allowance, the LU, I guess it's called. And so there's on the survey.
You've cut out. We can't hear you anymore. Is it just me? But I can't hear Mr. Heron anymore.
No, I can't hear him either.
Oh, good. I don't think it's my internet cutting out like it did yesterday at this moment.
No, he's gone for the,
Oh,
I think he's having
lost you
internet
guys.
connection issues.
Yeah, I'm in a rural area here and the internet is terrible. Can everybody hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yes, at this point we can hear you and we see what looks like an older survey on the screen.
Correct. So this is Mr. O'Hara's property up here. Here is the road allowance, which I believe is Georgian Bay Township, drawn on the map. There's no actual survey marks or anything I can find for that. This is all Crown land. And then this is my 2 lots here. And then of course, these are the potential stakeholders that go around this way. Here's Little Chute, Big Chute's over here, and what they call Gloucester Passage. Oops. So that gives you an idea there what we're looking at. So for just the Ansi impact assessment, one of the stakeholders is actually a civil engineer who deals with this road building and permitting quite often, Kathleen. And she obtained a ballpark quote for just the Ansi impact, which came out to $45,000 to $50,000, depending on the type of details that the township would like in it. So at this point, we have to take a step back and see if there's another way around this. We simply can't afford to spend that kind of money on these assessments only to find out that you know, it may not be permissible to put the road in anyways. So my proposal is to see if we can waive these requirements for the township until after the MNRF can complete their environmental assessment. And then if that is successful, which in talking to the MNRF, they don't see any, as they put it, showstoppers on their end, but they won't really do an assessment until they get the form signed from the township. And then so after that fact, then I think if it seems reasonable, we could follow up with whatever other assessments aren't addressed by the MNRF's assessment. There's no fee for the MNRF, at least that hasn't been expressed to me so far. And then the planning department mentioned perhaps only a lieu and what's called an EIA may be required depending on the outcome of this delegation. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. If we can sign an agreement or something that these very expensive assessments can wait until after the ministry's assessment and then see what kind of costs are going to be involved from that point. And that's basically the gist of it. I have some questions and concerns, but let me show you some pictures here to maybe give you a better idea. So as far as the Ansi goes, can everyone see this?
Yes, we can.
This kind of yellow shaded area is the Ansi area, which is deemed sensitive. Where we are here, this green route that you see was done with a handheld GPS along the existing trail. This is Mr. O'Hara's road here, existing road, O'Hara Point Road, I believe that's called, which comes off of Severn Lodge Road. And so we're right on the edge. I took a lot of time to see if we could get a route off the existing trail outside of the Ansi here, but this is all rock ridges through here. And if we were to move the road out of that edge of the Ansi, it would have a much bigger impact on the environmental concerns that are there, because this is all low-lying areas and cliffs, and there would need to be a significant amount of fill and stuff brought in order to make that happen. Whereas this here kind of goes along the top of a rocky ridge, and there's very little in materials or, as I mentioned, forestry that would be required. Now, I have some other pictures here. Again, that's the trail. You can see the lots. That kind of gives you an idea of the forestry that's there. You can see it's not very dense at all. It's mostly rock. And you can see down in here where these low-lying areas are that would be very difficult to get out of the edge of the Ansi. And you can see along here, all of these lots, these are all accessible by a road. There's a road that goes right through here. There's Mr. O'Hara roads. All these people all have a road. I think the full 66 allowance. We're just looking for a driveway here. This is the edge of Mr. O'Hara's road, and right in there, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a large cell tower. So there's already a road been started to here. And this is the part here that Mr. O'Hara had permitted, surveyed, and has removed all the stumps as of about 5 years ago, without needing to do any assessments apparently or anything like that for that portion of it. More of the same. There's kind of a shot from further back. You can see big chutes here. You can see there's roads all the way through here. So I think that's it for stuff to share. There's a kind of a scaled map you can see. So this section from here to the edge of my lot here, that's the 300 and some meters. It's not very far. I think that if anyone would be willing to come and have a walk of it, it would be seen pretty rapidly that there's not going to be a lot of impact on there. So here's my questions and concerns. Did what I propose make sense and seem reasonable? Does it seem acceptable? Are we missing anything? Well, here's a question. I wonder, are all these assessments required if I was only to be making the driveway on my own land? Or is it just because of the fact that we're crossing the Crown land? Or at what point do these assessments kick in? It's not really clear to me how that works. No.
Okay. Well, say thank you very much for your presentation. Council, I don't know if you have any questions for Mr. Heron. I will point out that item 8A, which will come up after we have the public portion of our meeting, is a report from our Director of Planning, Dr. Spilla, in regard to the comment form that the ministry requires from the township if they were to go ahead. So this will be a topic of discussion for council a little bit later this morning.
Great. Yeah, I sent a copy of that in as well to planning. If anybody wants a copy of any of this, I can send it. And I also sent all of the presentation and the surveys to Christine.
Well, we greatly appreciate the input. I wonder if you could stop sharing your screen and I can see everybody, and we'll see if there's any questions that any counselor wants to ask of you. I do see Councillor Vocek's hand up, so we'll start there, followed by Councillor Rienko, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, John, for the presentation. Very informative and enlightening. I do have a couple of questions. I know the property very well. As kids, we used to romp that area to get down and swim in the little chute. So I know the trail you're talking about. My one concern, I have a few, but my one concern is the license of occupation, the LOO. Do you know, John, if you're the only property that is abutting that township road concession, or is there other properties or neighbors that abut that road concession you're looking for the license of occupation on?
Yes, so it appears, looking at the survey now, obviously Mr. O'Hara's does, as well as I believe that's Jim Leach, or that could be Ron Breckville's property, where just the corner touches on it there on that attached survey. Do you want me to share my screen and you can have a look at that? Or?
No, I think that's okay. Our Director of Planning will certainly be making sure of that. I just know that it's a lot easier to gain your license of occupancy if you're the only property that abuts, but we'll probably be looking for comments from the other abutting neighbors as well too. Sure. That's it for now. Looking forward to hearing what Chris has to say on this matter as well. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Well done.
Thank you for your comments.
Councillor Rienko.
I got a couple of questions, probably one for Chris, maybe he can answer it later on, is that I'm somewhat surprised at this talk about the MNRF doing an environmental assessment. I didn't think they did those type of things without somebody paying for it, or I've never known them to do that themselves without some kind of a I guess as somebody sponsoring it. So I want to find out if they actually are proposing to do their own environmental assessment. So maybe Chris can handle that one later on. The question I have for John is that, have you come up with a budget that would for the construction of the road? Do you have any idea what that's going to cost?
Not yet. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. First, I wanted to make sure we could get the permits in place. Once we find out if it's going to be possible to get a permit to put it in, then I was going to have a couple of contractors have a look at it and see what they thought. Our initial plan when we started this was that nobody was interested in a road here, a driveway, due to the buy-in cost from Mr. O'Hara. As soon as I started contacting all of the stakeholders and said that we were going to go ahead and look at this, then it seemed like a lot more people became interested. So in my opinion, the more the better, the more people that we can have interested in doing this, so we can pool our money to, you know, put the road in, the better it's going to be. But until we find out if it's even possible, I haven't bothered to have anybody out to give us a ballpark on the gravel or what's needed. My initial plan was just to rent or buy my own excavator and just work on it slowly over the next 9 years until I retire to get it built.
Yeah, because the last private road that was built, that was probably 10 years ago, was well over $250,000. So there's quite a bit of money involved in doing that. So I just want to make sure that you understand that might be quite an expense. I see the director of planning put on a screen there. Maybe you'll answer my first question about the M&R.
Dr. Espilla.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that, everybody. Through your worship, with respect to Councillor Wanko's first question, so the MNRF will require an environmental impact assessment, and I'll be speaking about the township's requirement for an EIA also, and that will be at the cost of the proponents, and that would be standard for this type of application.
So you're saying there's two required, one from the M&R and one from township, or can be combined, or what?
Through your worship, yeah, I'll be discussing this more as part of my report and presentation. There'll be the optimal way to do this is to combine the two.
Interesting.
Okay. Councillor Bocek.
Yeah, just to follow up with Councillor Wianko's, Chris, just previous to me sitting, Paul was involved. It was about 12 years ago, North-South Road, which was a private road that was built. It did cross over crowned land. There was a concession road allowance with a license of occupancy. So we have a case history of this with the North-South Road, and I don't know if you can, if you care to or want to look at that as a reference, but I know it's pretty much the exact same project and scale as what we're dealing with here. And it might be advantageous to have a look at that too. Thank you.
Councillor Hazelton.
Just a couple of data point corrections here. The North-South Road was 20 years ago. And it doesn't cross any M&R land. It only crosses two township road allowances. And so the folks building the North-South Road had to come to the township and get approval to cross those two road allowances. It doesn't cross any public land. Just for John's frame of reference, the cost for each person on the road started at about $45,000 each, plus building their own driveways and everything else. So you need to have a serious commitment as a group to build something like that. Anyways, thought that might be helpful.
I agree. Thank you.
All right, I think Dr. Espilla, and then I think we'll move on because we'll have more opportunity to discuss this when we look at the report that Dr. Espilla is bringing for us later.
Thank you, Your Worship. The one additional comment I'd like to add to the councillor's comments is the key trigger here for the environmental impact assessment is that the proposed road would be within 120 meters of the area of natural and scientific interest, the Ansi, that is noted here. So that's a trigger under the provincial policy statement prepared under the Planning Act that has to be addressed, and that would be, and the appropriate mechanism is through an environmental impact assessment. So that's why the province and the municipality would be looking at having the proponent prepare one. Thank you.
All right, I think we've given quite a bit of time to this delegation. Mr. Heron, thank you very much. And I'm going to ask you to give us a little patience because we do have some public meeting portions that we should get through before we get to this. And we have quite a few people, public members waiting. So I'd like to get the public meeting portion of this meeting done, and then we'll get back to this topic a little bit later this morning.
Thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Should I sign off now then, or just sit tight?
Probably the clerk will put you into the participant or whatever attendee category in the short run, and then we can bring you back in when the topic comes in front of us again.
Thank you.
All right. Now, to get on to the more formal portion of our meeting, I've moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved, the council adopts the agenda of December 14th, 2021 as presented. Any comments? All those in favor? And that is carried. And now for one of those little speeches I'm required to make. This morning, there's a public meeting scheduled for one Shore Road closing application. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed Shore Road closings being considered. Next, staff will advise the purpose and the effect of the bylaw and provide for any other information that is relevant to the applications, and staff will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to speak and provide comments to the bylaw being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name and address and sign in on the sheet provided, I presume electronically. Council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Municipal Act of 2001, Section 25, as amended, to deal with the following proposed Shore Road closing bylaw. SRC-R20-11 for 151 Wesley Road. To our clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was published in a newspaper, and notice was sent to the abutting neighbors in close proximity of the property at least 20 days prior to today's meeting.
All right. And I see Ms. Levesque has graced us with her presence, and I presume I'm going to make a presentation for us, please.
Yes, good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to share my screen here. Everyone can see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, it's going smoothly this morning, better than last month. Okay, so the first, well, the only application we have this morning is for application R20-11. The applicant's name is Peter Salala for 151 Wesley Road. The Shorewood allowance has been requested by the applicants as part of their existing building is located on the road allowance and to allow for future development. The Shorewood allowance for part 1 is 1,334 square meters at a cost of $8 per square meter for a purchase price of $10,672 plus HST. The Shorewood allowance application was originally received October 13th, 2020. The property is zoned shoreline residential type 1. There are no open building permits on file, and we received no correspondence on this application. We have a location map here, as well as an aerial view and a site plan. As you can see, their bunkie is located on the Shore Road allowance and survey. And the applicant, Peter Salala, is present this morning if you have any questions for himself or me. And that's everything.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Salala, do you wish to add to the presentation in any way?
Good morning. Thank you. No, there isn't anything that I can add at this point. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I think Sydney has summarized it well.
All right. Thank you. Council, any questions that you may have in regard to this one? I'm seeing, oh, Councillor Jarvis.
It's probably our planning department. Sorry, clarification. The building that's on the Shore Road allowance is a bunkie. Is that correct, Sydney?
That's correct. It's a bunkie.
Okay. What considerations? I don't think we do it here, but are the considerations given later on for the setbacks on that bunkie?
Because it's legally existing there, I don't think there's any considerations on that, but Dr. Espilla here could comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. If there's nothing happening to the existing structure, it wouldn't trigger any further review by our department. Should further applications, be it a Planning Act application or a building permit application come forward, then we would review it in due course.
Then just as a follow-up and strictly a bit of an odd question, I think, but if we were to deny this purchase, what would be the situation with that building as being on our property as opposed to his? Would it have to be removed?
Through your worship, that is one of the options that the township could explore. It would be up to the township. There could be other alternatives also looked at, such as an encroachment agreement.
Right. Not that I would consider doing that, just curious. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
think Councillor George has to be very careful, because when I looked at the site plan, almost all the neighbors have something built on their shore road allowances.
Like I said, I just curious.
Any other questions? I have moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that council passed the closing bylaw 2021-081 to stop up, close, and convey part of the original Shorewood allowance in front of Lot 3, Concession 2, Freeman, being Part 1 of 35R-26647, now in the Township of Georgian Bay at 151 Wesley Road, for the purchase price of $10,672 plus HST. Any further comments? All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And that ends our Municipal Act public meeting. So now we get to go to a Planning Act public meeting, which means another speech. And if I understand our clerk correctly, our agenda originally showed 3 items under public meeting, but I believe there's only one. It's only the 3rd item that actually is the proper public meeting. Is that correct, Clerk Way?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry. There's a-
We have to do our speeches nonetheless. This morning, there is a public meeting scheduled for one proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendments being considered. The clerk will also advise of the appeal procedure. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws, provide any other information that is relevant to the applications, and the clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the amendments being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name and address for the record. After the public discussion, the public meeting will be closed. Council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendments. Z18-34 for somebody better pronounce that name for me, because I apologize because I'm doing it incorrectly, but it's nonetheless application Z18-34 to our clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was sent by first class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property subject to the proposed applications, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. These notices were sent at least 30 days prior to today's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed applications and a key map showing the location of the properties or description of the lands to be affected by the proposed amendments. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay official plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on this application, that any subsequent appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed zoning bylaw amendments must submit a written request to the planning department.
Thank you. And I believe at this point, we turn it over to our planner, Ms. Reed, who will make the presentation for us.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. I apologize for the poor lighting in here.
We'll try to concentrate on your presentation.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull up the presentation. So my screen's being shared. Can everyone see it?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay. So the township has received a zoning bylaw amendment application for 1408 Lost Channel Shore. So it is Z1834. So the applicant is Christine Tositis, and her agent is Peter Hungerford from Mary Poirier Planning and Associates. So this application is to rezone the lot from shoreline residential type 1 to shoreline residential exception type 1, or type 1 exception, sorry. The application is to reduce the front yard setback for an existing screen porch and an open deck, as well as to permit an increased dock width. So the screen porch, open deck, and the dock were all constructed without the benefit of a building permit. There was a public meeting held for this application back in February of 2019. In April of 2019, a decision was deferred on the application until it could be confirmed that these structures could comply with the Ontario Building Code, because they were not at this time. So we have received engineering drawings that have been submitted demonstrating compliance with the Ontario Building Code. It is our recommendation that the Township of Georgian Bay Planning Council grant approval for this zoning bylaw amendment application. So again, just the purpose and effect is to rezone the property from shoreline residential type 1 to shoreline residential type 1 exception. It's to reduce the minimum front yard setback for the existing screen porch and open deck from 20 meters and 16 meters to 3 meters, and to increase the permitted width of the existing dock from 3.1 meters to 3.5 meters. We did receive a fish habitat assessment report. Ultimately, this report concluded that permitting the development or the construction of the screen porch and open deck typically would not be permitted, as this property is located within 120 meters of type 1 fish habitat. However, it would likely cause greater impact to the natural environment by removing these structures. So they have provided a list of recommendations that will be implemented through site plan control process. And the same goes for the dock. Typically, they wouldn't permit one of this width in this area, but removing the dock would likely cause more impact to the fish habitat. So again, they just have some recommendations to include during site plan control. We've also received draft engineering drawings, and I believe we do actually have the final versions of those as well, which demonstrate how all of these structures can be brought up to code. So here is a location map of the subject lands on Lost Channel Shore. And I just have an aerial photo here as well. And then here is a copy of the site plan. So the building itself, when it was constructed, the cottage was set back only about 6 meters from the shoreline, though it's considered legal non-conforming as it was built prior to those setbacks coming into play. And then they have the screen porch you can see comes out just ahead, and then the open deck just to the side of it here. So with these additions, it's now set back only 3 meters from the shoreline. And then they have 2 docks. So it's dock 1, which is the one which exceeds the width of 3.1 meters, and it is at 3.5 meters. In terms of policy framework under the PPS, this is considered rural lands. In the district official plan, it's designated waterfront area. Again, along the shoreline of the property itself is type 2 fish habitat, but it is located within 120 meters of type 1 fish habitat. It's also been identified as having Engelmann's quillwort regulated habitat and deer wintering area stratum 2 overlay over the subject property, as well as being located within the Trent Severn waterway. So typically there are further requirements, further studies that have to be done for having these overlays and being in the Trent Severn waterway. These were not identified by the district nor the township when this application first came up a few years back. Again, they're going to be examined further in site plan control to determine if any further requirements are necessary, and they can be addressed through site plan control process as well. In the township official plan, it's designated waterfront. Again, it is located within 120 meters of the type 1 fish habitat, and that it is zoned shoreline residential type 1. So ultimately, we do believe that it is consistent with the PPS. It does conform to the district OP, provided the recommendations in the fish habitat assessment are implemented through site plan control. And then again, that the additional natural heritage and cultural heritage features are examined further in site plan control. And it does conform to the township official plan as well. So it is recommended that the subject lot be rezoned from shoreline residential 1 to shoreline residential type 1 exception to reduce the front yard setback for the existing screen porch and open deck to 3 meters and to increase the permitted width of the existing dock to 3.5 meters. So that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions at this time.
Okay,
Stop
thank you very
sharing.
much. I understand that the applicant is in attendance. Let me try this. Ms. Salcidis. I'm getting closer, I think.
That was fantastic.
I apologize for my messing up your name.
Oh, no, that's okay. Thank you so much.
Do you have any comments to add to the presentation?
No, I feel like all of the comments that were made were helpful and accurate. The only thing I would add is that when the shoreline assessment was done by the environmental assessment, there was an exploration for quillwort. At the time, no quillwort was found, but there was Blanding's turtle nesting in the area, which was part of the environmental sensitivity that was determined.
All right, thank you. Do we have any members of the public that wish to comment on this?
2 members of the public are present. Mr. Dan Duke and Ms. Bev Wicks. If they would like to speak, they are able to.
Please go ahead.
I'm actually not a member of the public. This is Bev Wick speaking. I'm representing Riverstone Environmental, and I did the fish habitat impact assessment for the property. And I think Dan Duke undertook the engineering work.
All right, so you're available if council has any questions.
I'm available if there's any questions, yes, about the fish habitat impact assessment or the recommendations that were contained in our report, the fish habitat report or the naturalization report.
Okay, and I see Mr. Hungerford. Are you a member of the public that wishes to comment?
Mr. Mayor, I'm the applicant's planner.
Okay.
I would add to Erin's presentation in a couple of points. Firstly, as she noted, the property was first developed in 1960, so it has been a cottage property for a long time. When our client purchased the property back in 2011, there was no understanding at the time that there were any problems with the property in respect of the porch or the deck. And it was, I believe, through a regular septic tank system inspection that it was revealed that we had issues with the porch and the deck. And so since that was discovered, we've been working to regularize what is there. And through our investigations and with the efforts of both Riverstone and Duke Engineering, I think we are at a point where we can resolve the concerns and move ahead through the preparation of a site plan agreement that will address the outstanding matters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think with that, unless there's anyone else who wishes to comment, I will turn it over to council for their questions and inquiries. And I see Councillor Cooper's hand has already gone up.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Yes.
May I please note the correspondence received?
Oh, yeah, actually, officially, I should have asked you that. I apologize.
That's all right. One letter of no objection was received from the District of Muskoka, provided that appropriate development control techniques are used to implement the recommendations of the submitted fish habitat assessments by Riverstone Environmental Solutions dated October 3rd, 2016.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, now we'll give you a chance.
Thank you, Mayor Katsir. Before I get into this application, I just have a quick question, and that is for my edification. What happened to 7A and B? Were they withdrawn? Is that?
No, I believe they're coming afterwards, but they're not. Apparently, they're not part of a public meeting. They're if you will, a council meeting as opposed to public. I'm not sure what the official words are, but
That's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to understand if it was a withdrawal or whatever. The second question, or the first question about this to Aaron, thank you for your presentation. Is this oversized, over width dock? Two things about it. One, is it a floating dock or a crib dock?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Cooper. I believe it's a floating dock, but perhaps I'll have Mr. Hungerford confirm that.
Yeah, that's correct, Aaron.
So in effect, if I may, just that there was a reference that there'd be sort of some disturbance to the fish habitat. A floating dock often gets moved around, especially over the winter months. Maybe this one doesn't, I don't know. Maybe there's no ice flow here, but often that is the case. But also this dock, when was it built is the other question, because I'm understanding that there's some pre-existing buildings, et cetera, that including the deck that were put in quite some time ago. But when was this over width dock built?
Thank you again. I'm actually not sure on the year it was constructed. I'm going back through the report here, the fish impact assessment report. I don't see it noted. Miss Cicitis, would you know the year?
I don't know the year, but I do know it existed prior to the purchase of the cottage by my family.
So basically then that's fine. I just wanted to understand, because we often get people building things and then asking for forgiveness later on. And this went with the purchase, although it wasn't identified when the purchase was made by your lawyer or whomever, that there were some areas where it didn't meet applicable law. Thank you.
thank you. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe my questions were answered in the last question, being I wasn't sure of the timelines. And I know that when we ask for engineered drawings, we're supposed to treat this like it was never there, and this is a new permitting process. And during that, so if this is approved, will there have to be application made and permits given to make everything legal in this case? And I guess that's probably a question for our building department or our planning department.
Yes, thank you again through the mayor to Councillor Bocek. I have spoken to the chief building official for the Township of Georgian Bay, so he has had some regular correspondence with Duke Engineering. So yes, they do require proper building permitting. The drawings that have been received do show how these structures can be built up to code. So they will have to get that permit. I can't speak to all of it. From my understanding though, they do need the planning approval prior to receiving the building permit. They do need to be in conformity with the zoning bylaw before a building permit can be granted.
Okay, and in a normal circumstances like this, when a property owner goes ahead and builds without a permit, which is not the case here, those permits and fees are doubled as a penalty for building without the permit. So my question here is, would there be a need for the double the fee, or would the family just have to pay the regular fee since it was inherited in the purchase?
I can't speak to that.
Okay.
That would have to go to the building permit department.
Okay, that's something that will be of concern, because normally when there's something built without a permit, the fees are doubled thereafter. And I don't think in this case that's really necessary because it was inherited upon the purchase of the property, but I'm sure our planning and building departments will look into that as well. Thanks for your comments, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wienko, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Well, just to follow up on that issue, it's a bit concerning that we're approving something today that doesn't meet the building code and that it has to be brought up to standards. And I wonder if we have the kind of the cart ahead of the horse here, where we're giving approvals and then they have to go away and do some construction. Shouldn't it be the other way around, that is brought up to standards and then we approve it? I'm just a little concerned that moving ahead a little too fast on this.
Thank you, Councillor Wanko. This application did come forward to Planning Council 3 years ago now, and it was deferred for that very reason, that the buildings did not meet building code. So it was deferred until it could be demonstrated that these buildings can be brought up to building code. So while I'm not the one that will issue a building permit, we have received engineering drawings demonstrating that they can be, which is why we're back at council today. Ultimately, today you're looking at, are you comfortable with these structures being set back 3 meters from the shoreline, and then again having a width of 3.5 meters for the dock? That by approving the zoning bylaw amendment still doesn't mean they're going to get their building permit. That has to go through the building department. But the two, Planning Act and the building code, are applicable law. So you need to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw before a building permit can be granted. And it is the CBO that will grant that building permit ultimately.
Okay, but you still basically have the cart ahead of the horse here. Like, they've had a couple of years to bring the structure up to compliance, and they haven't done it. So I'm just concerned that we approve this today, and then they sit on it and not even request a building permit, and they continue on. So what impetus does he have to get a building permit and bring it up to speed as soon as possible if we approve this today?
Well, there's an outstanding order on the property through you, Mr. Mayor.
And so that has to be satisfied, or the building department will order the structure removed.
That's correct. So one of the concerns was to demonstrate that the existing structures could be repaired without their total demolition and reconstruction. And that went to an issue of how much disruption might occur on the property. And so we've demonstrated through our engineering plans that repairs, if you will, can be made to the existing structures so that it can be brought up to code. And in that regard, we've worked with the chief building official steadily to satisfy him in that regard. We can't obtain a building permit without a site plan agreement, and we can't obtain a site plan agreement without a planning permission. So I guess we're trying to respond to all of these issues, in a logical way.
All right, thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, one's clerical. I'm curious about the spelling of our applicant's last name. I see it spelled two different ways. In her presentation to us here, her name is spelled differently than in the application. And I'm thinking that maybe for good order's sake, we should have the spelling correct throughout everything. So I believe there's a letter. We've got an additional letter in the application that's not in the actual name. I think that should be corrected for any future reference. And I don't know who would do that, but I think that's rather important to have the name correct. But it's tough enough trying to pronounce it properly. We should be spelling it properly too.
Thank you.
For starters. And then my second question is just to you, Aaron. I see in the Riverstone report a recommendation that dock 2, that would be, I presume, the smaller dock, they recommend to be removed. Is that part of our requirements here today?
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Jarvis. That's not part of our requirements today, but that will be looked at through site plan control.
That comes under site plan control. Okay, so there are two other recommendations in that same listing from Riverstone with regards to the use of the property near shore area, which I think would be rather difficult to enforce anyway, but that would be all part of the site plan as well. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. Okay.
My other question, I think, was answered, but I just want clarification. I'm curious to know how this came before our planning department. Is because the applicants need to do a rebuild because they realized that their structure was probably not quite up to code? And Peter, maybe you can answer that. I don't know.
Yeah.
My understanding is that when the building department were carrying out septic tank system inspections, it was discovered that these structures had been built without a permit. There was no record of them, I guess, in the building department. And perhaps the CBO can verify that. So that's really what occasioned the start of this process.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that too. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Hazelton.
Yeah, my memory of this when it came to us last time was that there was broad concern by all of us that we felt like we were over a barrel trying to approve something that was done by a previous owner, and the new owner sadly didn't have an effective real estate agent or lawyer to provide them with the proper information they needed on purchase to let them know that there were all these illegally non-conforming, built without permits issues. And so we're kind of in a bind here where we want to be seen as helpful, but at the same time, we're essentially approving something that would never be approved if somebody came and spoke to us in the first place. So I'm very concerned about that. I know that there was a great concern last time we talked about this, that we would tend to hold the line and say, no, this just doesn't make any sense. Don't try to force us into a situation approving something that should never have been approved. And new owner, sorry, it's you should go back to your lawyer and real estate agent and claim against them for the misrepresentations that they did. Having said all of that, I would like to ask our Dr. Espilla a question here, if he is available. And that question is, Councillor Cooper asked a question about the dock, the age of the dock, and the fact that it was a floating dock. Do we have any way, if this was approved, do we have any way to put a constraint on this, subject to the fact that we know that at some point in time, this dock is going to need to be completely rebuilt from a flotation standpoint, and that the dock would not be a candidate for a repair of that nature, that it would have to be downsized to a legal conforming structure in the future? Is that something that from a planning or whatever perspective can be put on any approvals?
Through your worship. So the issue, as I understand from Councillor Hazelton, is we have an existing dock that is going to have to be either repaired or replaced at some point in the future. And as it stands right now, it's a legal non-conforming dock. So we have policies in our zoning bylaw that would apply to such structures. And we would basically ask the applicant to adhere to the zoning bylaw description for for dock policies. So that's in Chapter 4 of our zoning bylaw. If they were to look for a variance to that, it would be preferable that it would be dealt with under this zoning bylaw amendment. Do it all under one rather than come back later and make that change. So at this time, they're allowed to rebuild exactly what they have with the same footprint. If they were to come forward to build something larger, then that would trigger a separate Planning Act mechanism. As far as stipulations that council wishes to apply, they have the option to make those recommendations and provide direction to administration for anything in the site plan agreement that we'd be working on in the future. So it's a long answer. It was a complex question, and if we need clarification, please ask.
So if I could just summarize, I think what I heard you say is, yes, there could be language put into the site plan that would constrain a rebuild to meet code in the future.
Well, through you, your worship, it has to meet the code regardless. The building code's not negotiable. The issue, as I understand it, is if there's going to be any deviation from what we have in our existing zoning bylaw, then my preference would be to see it addressed through this application rather than have it be addressed through subsequent minor variance applications.
So again, to reframe things, the zoning bylaw could be articulated that would say, approved for now, rebuild would be required to downsize to the normally approvable size.
So under the existing zoning bylaw right now, as it stands, they are allowed to rebuild with the same footprint that they have.
All I'm trying to do is figure out, is there a way to craft some words in the bylaw if this was to be approved? Is there a way to craft words into the bylaw that says, fine, you get to have what you have today, but you can't rebuild it in its current format. You can only rebuild it to meet the normal sizing that would be applied, without this current exception.
So under through your worship, the challenge is right now they are legally allowed to, under our bylaw, to rebuild exactly as it is with the same footprint.
I'm just trying to figure out, how do we change that?
Mr. Hungerford.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just make a comment. I think the site plan agreement can effectively deal with a future rebuild of the dock to comply with the current standards that exist at that time. I'm not sure that you can impose conditions inside a zoning bylaw. Additionally, there'll be some regulations of the Trent Severn waterway that will kick in. So I think that the concern that the oversized dock would be rebuilt in an oversized way can be addressed through the site plan agreement that runs with title, excuse me, and with confidence that the Trent Severn waterway have regulations as well that we must comply with.
All right. Councilor Cooper, you want a second go at this?
Just briefly, I really do agree that I wouldn't like to see this rebuilt in this particular size or width. And if it can be included in the site plan agreement that there would be a requirement in the future for it to meet, then I think that's a reasonable request on our behalf. And I think that's what Councillor Hazelton is alluding to. And so anyway, I would support that change. Thank you.
Dr. Spilla.
Thank you, Your Worship. And it does sound like that there is some willingness from the applicant to work with what's being proposed by council. So that's something we can work with on the site plan front, if given the interest expressed by the applicant's planner. Thank you.
Councilor Jarvis, you want another round as well?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I want to go back to, I remember the original application, the concern the council had at that time on legalizing something that was quite obviously well beyond what we would approve today. Having said all that, I understand where the applicant is on this, but I'm more curious to know if we can make sure through our planning department that future applications like this are given much more scrutiny than just coming to planning council with a recommendation. Because I mean, this is I feel it's unfortunate for the current owners that they weren't advised. It's unfortunate for a lot of people, including us, having to deal with it. But I just don't want to have to see anything like this in the future. That's all. Thank you.
I think, this has been in front of the township as a matter to be resolved for like 5 or more years now. I think it initially came in front of the Committee of Adjustment the prior term. And I think the biggest concern that was presented was the fact that this was built without a permit, and therefore the question was whether it was structurally sound. I think we recognize that there are many a property that have legal non-complying structures that are closer to the waterfront than we now would currently permit, including near neighbors of this particular cottage. When you look at this cottage relative to its neighbors, it doesn't stand out at all, really. And I think that to me, the biggest concern is safety. I mean, I remember being at a committee of adjustment discussing this, and the question was how much destruction would take place if you tore it down to the environment immediately around the structure. There's quite a few trees around it and everything else in it. And I think when we discussed it 2.5 years ago, or whenever it was in front of us, that we were saying that we wanted to make sure that it was a safe and sound structure, and that's now being addressed. It just so happens that the way our laws are written, that they have to get planning permission before they can go to the chief building officer to get their inspection done of the work and approval of the work it's still required. Well, frankly, I feel a little sorry for the applicant having to have going through all this for so many years in a structure they bought now a decade ago, having no idea that it was offside. So I think under the circumstances, I'm very glad to see that they've got a report and what has to be done to make that deck and porch up to building code to ensure that it's safe, even though we know it's been standing for, well over a decade. I'm not sure when the original build date was of it, but quite some time ago. So I think, this is a necessary step. When we looked at it 2.5 years ago, we said that we wanted them to address the structural soundness. They've now got that engineering report in order to do that. And so I think that I personally, I'm willing to approve this. Any other discussion? Councillor Cooper.
I'm willing to approve this with the agreement that there'll be verbiage in the site plan agreement to deal with the rebuild of the floating dock. I'd rather not to see that forgotten. Thank you.
All right. That's not in the current resolution, but I believe that staff has heard that. Do you want something added to the resolution?
Yes, please.
Okay. Ms. Way, can you craft a sentence for us? Dr. Spillier, did you want to add a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. It would be a much stronger resolution if we had verbiage with respect to council's direction for the site plan agreement in the resolution. So it could be something along the lines of that administration or that that when the proposed dock is rebuilt, that it be rebuilt into conformity with zoning bylaw 2014-75.
Well, or built within restrictions of the zoning at the time of the rebuild. There may be, by the time they rebuild it, there may be a new zoning bylaw. We might be updating it next term.
There is a possibility of that, Your Worship.
Wouldn't it just have to adhere to the building code?
I beg your pardon?
Wouldn't it just have to adhere to the building code at that time?
And the zoning bylaw.
And zoning, okay. And applicable zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
That's a good wording, and applicable zoning bylaws.
I know Ms. Way is happily or not typing away.
Your Worship, do you want to check your chat?
I see you've added something there. It said that the floating dock may only be permitted to be rebuilt to conform to zoning and building standards of the time. Okay, so what I would suggest then is we'll have a motion moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council receives Development Service Report 2021-92 and that Council approves zoning bylaw amendment application Z 18-34 by passing bylaw 2021-085, being a bylaw to reduce the required front yard setback for the existing screened porch and open deck to 3 meters and to increase the permitted width of the existing dock to 3.5 meters, and that the floating dock may only be permitted to be rebuilt to conform with zoning and building standards of the time. Any further discussion? Councilor Jarvis?
I apologize for this, but there are 2 floating docks. Do we need to reference which one has got to be rebuilt according to zoning bylaws?
Well, in reality, anything would have to be rebuilt according
Okay,
to zoning
fine.
bylaws in the
That's
future.
fine. Yeah.
All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you all. Have a nice day.
You as well. Thank you. You. And that ends the public meeting. And so now we're going to go to items 7A and 7B, which are 2 removal of holding symbol applications. And because if I understand correctly, they don't require a public meeting under the Planning Act. And I believe that Mr. Farragon will be presenting the first application, which is for the zoning bylaw amendment application Z21-16 in regard to 2542 Island 1810. Mr. Farragon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We're very happy to be here with you this morning to provide an overview of the report, but perhaps I can ask Ms. Way to bring my colleague, Ms. Sony, into the conversation, and Gersimran will provide council with an overview of the next 2 reports that we have on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Please go ahead.
My name is Gersimran, and I am a planner with J.L. Richards and Associates, and I will be presenting the first application today. And I have a presentation prepared. If I'll just quickly share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the first zoning bylaw amendment application for the removal of hold has been submitted by the applicants of this, by the registered owners of the subject property through their agent, Celeste Phillips Planning Inc., in care of Celeste Phillips. The address of the subject property is 2542 Island 1810 in Georgian Bay. The application is for the removal of hold, which requires completion of a survey to confirm the lot area above the specified contour and location of the high water mark. The staff recommends that the Township of Georgian Bay Planning Council grant approval to the zoning bylaw amendment application. Here is a location map of the subject property. The subject property is water access only, has an area of approximately 3.51 hectares and a frontage of approximately 153.6 meters along the shoreline. Here is an aerial photograph of the subject property. The property is largely occupied by natural vegetation, but the applicant has stated in the application that the subject property has a deck, a dock along the shoreline, and a septic bed on the subject property. In terms of the existing policy framework, the subject property is considered rural lands under the PPS. In terms of the district official plan, the subject property is designated waterfront area and rural. The subject property is also identified as a Muskoka heritage area and site, and identified to have moderate to high archaeological potential. In terms of the township official plan, the subject property is designated waterfront in the Palisade Bay, Eastbourne Island coastal waterfront community. It is also identified as a Muskoka heritage area and is adjacent to type 2 fish habitat. In terms of the zoning bylaw, the subject property is zoned shoreline residential island type 2 with a holding symbol. The application has been reviewed in context of the applicable planning framework. It is found to be consistent with the PPS as a residential development is permitted on rural lands. An applicant intends to develop the subject lands for a cottage and a bunkie. The application also conforms to the district official plan as the future proposed uses are permitted in waterfront and rural designations. The need to address Muskoka natural heritage areas and sites and archaeological potential will be addressed at site plan stage. The application also conforms to the township official plan. The proposed uses are permitted in waterfront designated lands in Palisade Bay, Eastbourne Island waterfront area community. Further, section F.5.6.3 of the official plan states that a site plan control will be required for development on the subject property. The need to address Muskoka Heritage Area designation will be addressed at that stage. The official plan policies do not require fish impact assessment for lands that are adjacent to type 2 fish habitats. In terms of the zoning bylaw, the applicant has submitted a survey to fulfill the requirements of hold removal. The area of the subject property is 3.51 hectares, which is in compliance with the minimum required 1 hectare by the zoning bylaw. The frontage is approximately 153.6 meters, which again is in compliance with the minimum required 120 meters by the zoning bylaw. Additional clarification is needed on the other existing structures in terms of the dock length, area of decks, or height of decks, etc., and that will be addressed at the site plan stage. Here is a snippet of the survey that was submitted by the applicant as a part of the application. The location of the high water mark is noted in the figure. This is again a site plan that was submitted by the applicant with the application, and the location of high water mark is again noted here. Staff recommend approval of the application on the basis that the applicant has met the precondition to remove the holding symbol on the subject lands, which included the preparation and submission of a plan of survey. That is the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have now.
All right, thank you very much. Council, any questions? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier, and I have 2 or 3 questions here. First of all, just for my understanding, and maybe for some of us on council, it was stated that there's no public meeting required to have a hold removed. Is that, and I think I heard that it was as a result of the Planning Act. And my question is that something that we could include in our official plan and zoning bylaws if we wanted to have a public meeting required for a hold being removed?
Through your worship, that's not standard practice. That would be going above and beyond the requirements of the Planning Act, and that would be up to the discretion of council. As I said, it's not standard practice.
Thank you for that clarification, but we could request that. So that's, or we could say that's part of our official plan or our zoning bylaws, correct?
Through your worship, if council chose to take that direction, we could put a policy in place to do such.
Thank you. And just with respect to this particular application, I'm a bit confused. So we can put in docks and septic systems and then lift a hold? Would it not work the other way around? A request to do a survey, lift the hold, and then build something? Or is this not backwards? Could you explain that to me, please? Somebody? Thank you.
Through your worship, in this case, the hold is in place for the removal of the shoreline road allowance, and that has to occur prior to development, and that's based on the direction that previous councils have provided, and that's why the policy exists. Holds can be put in place for a number of reasons. They can be put in to require a variety of studies to be done, various conditions that council may choose to satisfy. That's really a larger discussion than we're here for today to discuss with the application that Gershman's presenting on. So that would be an interesting discussion topic for a future official plan review of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan.
Thanks for the clarification. I'd like to have that discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Wienko, followed by Councillor Bocek.
Yeah, so the risk of sounding like a broken record, when I tried to blow this, the survey up to have a look at where the high water mark was, I couldn't discern anything. And I would like our planning department or whoever to try and provide documentation that's easier to look at when we review these prior to our meetings, so we're better prepared. So I had no idea where the high water mark is. So Gerson, I appreciate you telling me. But I see there's also a structure. Is there a structure other than the docks right at the high water mark? Is that, I don't know what that is. I can't blow it up to determine, but is there something right there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there is an existing deck on the subject property just near the high water mark, and we don't have the details on the area and all the other stats on those structures, and those structures will be dealt through the site plan.
Site plan, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I appreciate the clarification. Yeah, like I said, I just didn't know what it was. If we can get diagrams that when we make them larger, we can still read the notations, it would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wienko, please.
Well, I just answered one of my questions was that are there any structures on the property, and you indicated that there was a platform there. When we approve lifting these holds for even vacant lots, is there a requirement for the proponents to purchase a Shorewood allowance, or are they permitted to continue to build on the property, on a vacant property, without having to purchase the Shorewood allowance? It seems like they should almost purchase it because they have structures on it. So are we requiring them to purchase their Shorewood allowance in this case?
Is my understanding that we passed a bylaw quite a few years ago that said that if anybody wanted to build anything, they'd have to get their Shorewood allowance purchased in order to do that. But I could be corrected on that.
Mm-hmm. So existing structures are permitted because they're legal non-conforming, and moving forward would potentially need a license of occupation. But any new structures, definitely they would need to purchase, because under the building code, they need to own the land.
That may not answer my question. If they were going to build on the Shorewood allowance, you have to purchase it. I agree there. But if you had a vacant lot and you wanted to develop it, are you required to buy a Shorewood allowance? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, well, maybe that should change.
Councillor Bocek. Oh, so Dr. Spiller, you want to respond first, and then we'll go to Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're hearing a lot of questions and comments today from council. They're good questions, and they might be beyond the scope of the application that you're considering at this time. They are very relevant, however, for future official plan review and zoning and bylaw review discussions. So I'll leave it up to you as council as how you wish to proceed with that.
From my perspective, I'm permitting the question. I'm not going to permit lengthy discussion going off topic on what's in front of us. But raising of the question, I think, is all part of your introduction to the township. You get to hear some of the concerns that we have. So that's why I'm allowing the question being raised, but I don't want lengthy discussion on the questions that when they're not relevant to this application.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chris, while you're lit up there, I have a question for you. what we're being asked for here is to remove a hold, and the only parameters in the official plan for removing the hold is that we verify through the survey process that there's enough acreage and there's enough frontage. And that's the only thing we're here to do today.
And the high water mark.
And the high water mark.
Through your worship, those are the existing policies for the removal of a hold in the existing zone.
Okay, so I have no issues with it because it does comply. So I have no issues with passing this. Thank you.
Councillor Yanko.
So pertinent to this project, pertinent to this topic, there's two structures on the shore road allowance. There's a dock and there's a platform. They should be taken out if they don't own they should both be removed if they don't own the shore road allowance. Help me out here.
Depends when they were built.
But we're going to have a site plan, are we not? And so the site plan's going to approve these structures on land they don't own. I'm having a problem here.
Ms. Way.
I could just respond, your worship. There are several properties within the township that have docks on them that are not owned, that do not own their shore road allowance, and we can address those through a license of occupation process. They do not need to own them. And it's, in most cases, it's because they're pre-existing structures prior to the current building code.
Ms. Phillips, are you going to share with us a bit of history of this property?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I represent the owner of the property, Frank Charlebois. He is here in attendance as well. What I wanted to say is that Mr. Charlebois bought the property and it already had 2 decks on it and a septic system. So it's not that he has reversed the process and gone ahead and built something before the hold has been released. He actually purchased the property with those elements on it. He has subsequently removed the upper deck, but the lower deck still remains. With respect to the shore road allowance, in my review of the survey, I don't see a shore road allowance on this particular property. But regardless, the recommendation from your planning consultants are that this matter proceed to site plan control, which means they will ask for the positioning of the cottage and the bunkie to go on this property and verification of the height of the existing deck. So those are really the comments I want to make, unless Mr. Charlebois want to give you a little bit more on the history. But as I understand it, those the deck was properly built with a permit issued by the municipality in 1984. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that history. And also just to further comment is that when I look at the zoning bylaw map that was in our part of our report, there was no shore road allowances shown on any of the properties like this property, north or south. So I'm suggesting either they were never existed or they've already been bought. So I don't think there's a shore road allowance relevant to this particular property.
That is correct.
Councilor Jarvis.
Yeah, I just want to clarify things. My understanding is that islands don't have shore road allowances. The mainland does.
Well, that's not entirely true. When you look at the same survey map and the other side of the island, there's a few properties that are showing a shore road allowance.
Yeah, we might want to get that clarified. Good, but that was my understanding. Okay.
Nobody says that the surveyors of 100 years ago actually knew where they were, if it was island or mainland in some cases, perhaps. I don't know. Before my time. Ms. Gunby.
Thank you. I just wanted to end the conversation about shore road allowance. So Ms. Phillips is correct. There is no shore road allowance not purchased at this property. And there is nothing stating that only islands do not have it or only mainland does have it. There's no rhyme or reason why only some properties have it and some don't.
Councillor Cooper.
That may be correct, but I just think we need to, if you look up and down the shore and at our maps, 98% of the islands do not have shore road allowance. So it's pretty clear when we did 2014 - whatever it is, 7525, that we may have inadvertently included a few island lots, probably, whereby there is shore road allowance. And frankly, as I understood it, when we were working on that 2014 plan, that islands would not and did not have shore road allowance. So thank you for that.
All right, let's get back to lifting of this hold. I have at this point a motion moved by Councilor Jarvis, seconded by Councilor Wienko. Be it resolved that council received Development Service Report 2021-90 and that bylaw 2021-083, being a zoning bylaw amendment, Z21-16, be enacted to lift a holding or H2 symbol on lands located at 2542 Island 1810, Palisade Bay, East Bone Island. Any further discussion? All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And now we have one more request to lift a hold, and that is for its application Z21-14 for 1984 Island 404 or Quarry Island. And Ms. Sony, is it Sony?
Yeah, it's
Ms. Sony,
yes,
are you presenting on this one as well?
yes, I will be presenting on this as well, and I'm gonna share my screen. I have a
Thank you.
presentation ready. The township received another zoning bylaw amendment application for the removal of hold. The applicants are David and Katie Proctor. The address of the subject property is 1984 Island 404. Again, the application is a removal of hold symbol, which requires completion of a survey to confirm the lot area above the specified contour and location of the high water mark. The recommendation of the staff is that Georgian Bay Planning Council grant approval to the zoning bylaw amendment application. Here is a photograph of a location map of the subject property. The subject property is water access only, has an area of approximately 0.4 hectares and a frontage of approximately 40.41 meters along the shoreline. Here is an aerial photograph of the subject property. The property is largely vacant and occupied by trees and natural vegetation at this time. Here are some photos of the subject property that were submitted by the applicant along with the application as a part of their natural heritage assessment report. In terms of the existing policy framework, the subject property is considered rural lands under the PPS. The subject property is designated water.
Excuse me, I think this particular screen was from the prior application that you just put up. We're looking at the Palisades Bay screen.
I apologize for the figure. The policy framework is correct. The figure on this one, I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. In terms of the district official plan, the subject property is designated waterfront area, is known to have karst topography, and is identified as having moderate to high archaeological potential. In terms of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan, the subject property is designated waterfront in the Honey Harbor coastal waterfront community and is adjacent to type 2 fish habitat. In terms of the zoning bylaw, the subject property is zoned shoreline residential island type 1 or SRI1 with a holding symbol. The application has been reviewed in context of the existing planning framework and has been found to be consistent with the PPS. The residential development is permitted on rural lands, and applicant intends to develop the subject lands for a detached residential dwelling. With respect to hazardous lands policies of the PPS, the applicant has submitted a site servicing report that concludes that environmental conditions within the portions of the subject property are not limiting to the proposed development. This will be further addressed at the site plan stage. In terms of the district official plan, the future proposed uses are permitted in the waterfront designations. The need to address karst topography and archaeological potential will be addressed again at the site plan stage. In terms of the township official plan, the proposed uses are permitted in the waterfront designated lands in Honey Harbor coastal waterfront community. Section F5.6.3 states that site plan control shall apply to any development on the subject property. The official plan policies do not require fish impact assessment for lands that are adjacent to type 2 fish habitats. Further, the applicant has submitted a natural heritage assessment report prepared by Azimuth Environmental Services that states that development of property is feasible without endangering fish habitat. The applicant has also submitted a natural heritage assessment that outlines species at risk and states that nothing of importance has been discovered on the site at this point, but further studies may be required by the ministry, which again will be addressed at the site plan stage. In terms of the current zoning bylaw permissions, the subject property has an area of a little bit more than 4,000 square meters, which is in compliance with the minimum requirement of 4,000 square meters by the zoning bylaw. The existing frontage of the subject property is 40.41 meters, which is less than the zoning minimum zoning permitted, the minimum permitted by the zoning bylaw of 60 meters. But section 4.11.f of the zoning bylaw permits development of vacant undersized lots, which existed on the date of the passing of the bylaw, but if the frontage and area conditions are satisfied. The minimum frontage required in this case is 27 meters, and the minimum lot area required is 0.2 hectares. The subject property satisfies the above conditions and is therefore in compliance with the zoning bylaw. Here is a snippet of the survey that was submitted by the applicant as a part of their application. I have again highlighted the high water mark on this survey. Here is a servicing footprint that was submitted by the applicant as a part of their application. This photograph identifies the potential development area on the subject property that was identified through their studies that were done on the subject property by Azimuth Environmental Services. Staff recommend approval of the application on the basis that the applicant has met the preconditions to remove the holding symbol on the subject lands, which included the preparation and submission of a plan of survey. This is the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have now.
All right, thank you very much. The applicants are present. I don't know if they wish to make any additional comments. I'm not seeing them change, so I'm going to presume they do not. So I'll say council. Any questions on this application? And we'll start with Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Rienko, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzer, and thank you very much for the report. I just wanted to ask a question about, well, a couple of observations, but one question. I see this is Quarry Island, and there's no shore road allowance. It's an island. But I'd like to also ask, with the diagram that we saw where it showed the site of the septic system and the building envelope, could you just, it's kind of small for me to see on my screen, and I wondered if you could just explain to me what the orange is versus the green.
Yes, I'll share my screen again to show the diagram here. So as per the diagram that was submitted by the applicant, the Azimuth Environmental Services has prepared this diagram that shows the developable area on the subject property that is highlighted here in yellow. The orange here highlights the potential future dwelling footprint on the subject property, and the green here shows the location of the septic bed footprint.
So that clarifies a couple of things for me. One is the septic system is in front of the cottage, which I think is what you're showing here. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is the distance from the septic bed to the high water mark?
So this is a preliminary diagram that was submitted by the applicant. We do not have those details, and those would be dealt with at the site plan stage once there's more information on how the applicant proposes to proceed with the development on the subject property.
Sorry, can I just make a quick note? Can you hear me?
Please. Yes.
Hi, I'm Katie Proctor. I'm one of the applicants. So when we got the site evaluation report there, we actually would prefer to have our septic bed at the back with a pump. And there is a caveat in our site evaluation report that does state that that is possible and that there was no concerns. This was just their preliminary picture that we would go with.
So thank you for that clarification, and I'm very pleased to hear that it's going to be reversed as to what we see here, I think is what you're saying.
Yes.
And that is encouraging for me. I still believe, though, that in the township of Georgian Bay for new septic systems, there's a 30-meter setback where, if and ever possible. So if it can't be back 30 meters, it should be as back as far as possible. And we need that because of we need to protect the waters in Georgian Bay. So I just would like to make that comment that you know, it's very important, and yes, it's all going to be taken care of at the time we do approve of this or that, but I think it's important for us to make note of these setbacks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Yanko, followed by Councilor Bocek.
Well, that was exactly the situation I was going to bring up. So I'm glad that Councillor Cooper brought it up, because I'm not, there's not too many properties that we approve where the septic system's in the front yard. So I'm glad to see that's going to be moved back. The proponent may also want to consider moving the well to the front of the cottage, closer to the lake too. So, because if you move the septic system back too far, then it'll be too close to the well, and then you got a problem that way. So I think there has to be some work done on the envelope before it's finalized, but that's just my comments.
Councilor Bocek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This application seems to meet all the parameters in order for lifting the hold, so I have no concerns with it at all. Thank you.
Councilor Jarvis.
Once again, I appreciate having clarification on the high water mark. I will helpfully note to all council that there is no shore road allowance on this mapping, which is interesting. Again, it's an island. Karst topography. Gerson Ram, can you clarify what that means?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Those karst topography is identified as hazardous lands in the PPS, and in the official plan, it is also noted that these lands are to be avoided for development. But as per the site evaluation report that was submitted by the applicant that was prepared by Azimuth Environmental Services, the applicant has the consultant has noted that the lands can be developed without any, like, there are no, the topography or is typical of the area, and there are no major concerns to development. These will be further identified and screened at the site plan stage.
Yeah, so for clarification, unlike a lot of the islands in the biosphere, this is not granite, this is limestone and topography, and there is possibility for, in limestone environments, sinkholes. So last thing I want is for a cottage to fall into a big hole, but okay, that's something that's being looked at. I appreciate that. And the other thing was, I looked at the photograph. One of the photographs showed the shoreline, and that type of topography indicates to me that that's a very, very gradual shoreline. I know that is not part of this discussion, but I think it should be noted that putting any kind of dock structure in on that shoreline will be problematic because of the water level changes within the Georgian Bay being upwards of 2 meters. And I think that homeowner is going to end up, if the water goes down, with significantly more land, but also some difficulties in trying to maintain a dock. But that's for future reference. Anyway, thank you.
Councilor Hazelton.
Thank you, Mayor Kutz here. I'd like to make a few comments. I'll start kind of in reverse order here to Councilor Jarvis's comment about docks and so on. Those of you who may have been around Corey Island will know that most of the properties on that shore have primitive docks, and almost everybody has a commercial grade marine railway. They do not leave their boats in the water. The wave action is quite destructive. And it's really quite fascinating to see all the heavy duty marine railways to get the boats out of the water on arrival at the shore. So one comment. The second comment I have is to echo Councillor Jarvis's comment about from a previous application. We have a site survey. It's included in the package, but you can't zoom in on it and read it. And it would be really helpful if in the future, if any site survey that's attached could be attached in such a way that it is zoomable, zoom as in zoom in, and you can actually read it, because then that stops questions coming that we could satisfy just by reading the document. And the third comment I have is I'm absolutely delighted with the servicing footprint diagram. I do recognize that there's probably a change in it, but it's one of those things where that color diagram, you can glance at it and virtually immediately get an understanding of what it is the applicant is trying to do. You don't have to really look at anything else. And as long as it's a good representation, I would say every application that is submitted should have a diagram like that, because that's in my mind a snapshot. I could glance at that and go, yeah, that meets all the criteria. No discussion needed. Approve. Thank you.
Well, wouldn't it be nice if we had all these things that we could approve without any discussion? Could you imagine? But having said that, we've had a fair
fun
bit
at
of
all,
discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
I have moved by Councillor Rienko, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved, the council receives Development Service Report 2021-91 and that Bylaw 2021-084, being a zoning bylaw amendment, Z21-14, be enacted to lift a holdings H2 symbol on lands located 1984 Island 404, Quarry Island. Any further discussion? All those in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
And now let's go back to the O'Hara Point Road application. We have a staff report in front of us, and let's do that at this point. And I believe, where did my report go here? There we go. I believe that's Mr. Spiller. Are you the one presenting that report?
Yes, Your Worship, I'll be presenting the report.
Well, then I would ask that you go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll start to share my screen. Okay, Mayor and Council, what we have before us is a report on the municipal comment form work permit prepared under the Public Lands Act for the extension of O'Hara Point Road. So the highlights of the report: the townships received a request to complete a municipal comment form for the works proposed under the Public Lands Act. Prior to entering discussions with the proponent, the Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry has requested that the municipal comment form be provided by the township, advising whether the proposed works comply with the township's planning policies. And to facilitate a smooth environmental review process, staff are recommending that conditional approval be granted to this request. So as you've seen previously this morning, there's a location map of where the existing road is and the lands that are to be accessed by the proposed road extension. There's an aerial image of the proposed site. So the existing road ends right about here. The proponent's properties are located right here in the blue shaded area. So the requirements that we're looking at. So we require an EIA that would identify the most appropriate route for the proposed site of a private extension of O'Hara Road. So the EIA would determine the route. There were some discussions in the earlier delegation about potential options and potential constraints associated with each of those options. From the environmental side, tree cutting would be required, and we'd obviously be striving to minimize damage to our forest resources, and the details of such would be included in the EIA. In terms of municipal services, the proposed road would be required to meet minimum fire department access requirements as established in the Ontario Building Code. That's so that any of our vehicles, some of which are quite heavy, could effectively have egress to the property. Additionally, the township would require, in accordance with our policy documents, that the proposed private road be set back a minimum of 20 meters from the high water mark, and that would be identified by a plan of survey. So the approval authority with respect to this application, council is not the approval authority. We're asking council for endorsement of the proposal subject to the recommendations that have been made in the report from the planning department. The Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry is the approval authority under the Public Lands Act. So they will be the one who make the final decision with respect to whether this application is approved or not. So at that point, I'll turn it over for questions and discussions, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So if you could stop sharing your screen, then I'll be able to see everyone. Please.
Yes, we're just having some meeting control issues here on the, there we go. Much better.
Now I can see everyone. Any questions? I mean, we have a very lengthy, resolution, but I'm wondering if anyone has any questions about it before I read the full length resolution. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, just curious, in the presentation made earlier in the delegation, there were some lands that had some sort of protected status on either side of the Severn River there. Dr. Spilla, does that factor into the report? I'm sorry, I may have missed it.
Through your worship. So there are lands that are protected. They're an Ansi, an area of natural and scientific interest. So that is one of the triggers for why the municipality is, why both the municipality and the ministry would be asking for an environmental assessment to be prepared. So that's consistent with the provincial policy requirements and the Natural Heritage Reference Manual that was prepared by the former Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry that discusses all sorts of issues related to these topics.
Okay, I guess what I needed was the definition of what ANSI stood for, but thank you, you've done that.
Any other questions? All right, well, I'll read the resolution and then we'll go from there. Moved by Councillor Cooper, second by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved, the Development Service Report 2021-84 dated November 9th, 2021, with respect to a municipal comment form for works proposed under the Public Lands Act, being the extension of a private road, O'Hara Point Road, be received. And the council endorses the proposal subject to the completion of an environmental impact assessment that proposes the most appropriate route for the extension of the private road, O'Hara Point Road, and that relief be granted to the tree cutting bylaw 2014-75 to permit the construction of an extension of the private road as recommended by the environmental impact assessment. And that the proposed private road be set back at least 20 meters to the regulated high water mark of the water body. And the proposed private road be designed to the minimum standards for the fire department access as established by the Ontario Building Code. And that prior to any site alterations commencing, council requires the proponent to make application with the clerk's department for a license of occupation for the use of the unopened municipal road allowance. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right. What we have left is to go into closed, and I'm wondering whether we should just take a 10-minute break before we go into closed, and then we'll go into closed to complete off the meeting. All right, so let's start again at 11:05, please.